Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're stepping away from the purely digital world. We're talking about something physical, AI, that's actually building things, moving stuff around. Physical AI and robotics. It's really taking off.
It really is. For so long, AI was just dot code, software in the cloud. Now we're talking systems that can actually interact with the physical world and the investment flow. It shows just how serious this shift is becoming.
Okay, so our mission today then.
Yeah, basically, we want to sift through all this global robotics market data for you. We're looking ahead, say, 2025 to 2030. And the goal is really to separate what's happening now, the real industrial automation, from the, let's say, the sexier humanoid hype, give you a quick way to grasp where the money is going and what the big challenges are.
Right, and when you mention the money,
Yeah.
it's not trivial, is it? The growth numbers are pretty wild.
Oh, absolutely staggering. Our sources show global robotics investment jumped, get this, almost 230% between 2019 and 2024.
230%? Wow.
Yeah. And looking ahead, the total market, it's projected around $8.8 billion for next year, 2025. But that's expected to climb to something like $20.6 billion by 2030.
Okay, so more than double in 5 years. That's serious momentum.
It is. But, that kind of growth needs a solid base. And that base, well, it isn't built on robots doing backflips just yet. It's built on the machines already hard at work on factory floors.
Okay, let's unpack that then. Start with the foundation, the current backbone.
Yeah.
These traditional industrial and service robots, these are the workhorses, right?
Yeah, absolutely the workhorses. They are the giants right now. If you look at the 2023 data, the scale is just immense. Manufacturers installed, wait for it, 541,302 industrial robots globally in just 1 year.
Over 500,000 new robots in a year.
Yep, the second highest count ever recorded. And that pushed the total number of robots actually working the operational stock past the 4 million mark for the first time.
4 million.
Right, we're talking 4.28 million units actively operating, and that itself was a solid 10% jump from 2022. So steady growth on a huge base.
And geographically, where are these robots concentrated? I think I can guess.
You probably can. It's Asia, dramatically so. Asia accounts for 70% of all those newly deployed robots. 70.
70. Okay.
And within Asia, well, China's in a league of its own. In 2023, China alone took 51% of all global installations.
So more than half of all new factory robots went into China.
Exactly. Just think about that for a second. Their operational stock is now 1.76 million units. That's like 41% of all the factory robots working anywhere in the world. It's a massive, clearly state-influenced push towards automation.
Okay, so that's the East. What about the West? How does that compare? Let's take the Americas.
The Americas, so primarily the U.S., Mexico, Canada, they were kind of flat in 2023, trended sideways, but importantly, at a very high level, a lot of that stability seems linked to this push for supply chain nearshoring, bringing production closer.
Right, but nearshoring often means higher labor costs, doesn't it?
Precisely. And that's the key. That nearshoring strategy often doesn't really pencil out financially without significant automation to offset those higher North American wages.
Yeah.
The robots sort of make it viable.
Interesting. So automation is almost like the enabler or the subsidy for bringing those supply chains back. Wait, what about Europe?
Europe saw a bit of an increase in 2023, about 9%. But our sources suggest a lot of that was just catching up, clearing out backlogged orders from previous years that got delayed.
So not necessarily new underlying demand kicking in.
Maybe not entirely, and that's why the forecast for Europe in 2024 looks a bit concerning. They're actually predicting a pretty significant contraction, maybe the double-digit drop in new installations.
Ouch. Why the pessimism there?
Well, several factors. Things like higher energy costs hitting manufacturers, general political uncertainty, maybe making companies hesitant to invest big capital. And some sources point to the relative weakness, particularly in the European automotive sector compared to, say, China's EV push.
Right, the macro environment always bites eventually. Okay, but someone's still buying. Who are the biggest customers for these industrial robots?
Automotive actually just reclaimed the top spot. About 25% of all installations. You can imagine the shift to EVs, alternative drives, that requires huge retooling and automation investment.
Makes sense. And they overtook?
They overtook electronics. Electronics dropped to 23%, and that sector actually contracted quite a bit in 2023.
Why the drop there?
Well, it looks like a classic case of market hangover. During the peak demand years, especially for consumer electronics, manufacturers maybe got a bit over-enthusiastic with their robot purchases.
So they basically overordered, Bought too many shiny robot arms?
Pretty much. Inventory correction is the polite term. They realized they'd over-indexed on capacity based on peak demand, and now they're digesting that.
Huh. I can just picture a warehouse manager staring at rows of unused robots thinking, right, that was perhaps a bit optimistic.
Exactly. It happens even in high-growth sectors. But the key takeaway is that this, somewhat boring industrial automation, that's the solid, profitable foundation the whole sector is built on.
Okay, so the steady workhorses are paying the bills, but they're not capturing the imagination or maybe the VC funding, quite like the next phase, right? The humanoid revolution. This is where it gets really exciting, or maybe speculative.
Definitely both. Humanoids are attracting massive investment. You see names like NVIDIA pouring money in, driven by this whole vision of physical AI. But yeah, we absolutely need a reality check against the hype cycle here.
Because the videos online make it seem like they're ready for prime time, running, jumping.
Those demos are impressive, no doubt. But in terms of actual market share, bipedal robots are still tiny, almost statistically insignificant right now.
How tiny are we talking? Because like I said, headlines suggest they'll be, I don't know, folding or laundry next year.
Yeah, not quite. According to a Digitimes analysis we looked at, humanoids are forecast to be just 0.2% of the global robot market in 2025. 0.2%.
Wow, okay. That's sobering.
It is. And even looking out to 2030, the projection is still only around 2.0%. So that really underscores the long, staged evolution needed here. It's driven by high costs and, frankly, immense technical complexity.
So that small percentage implies a slow ramp up. The source breaks this down, doesn't it, into different phases for humanoids.
Exactly. Digitimes categorizes it quite usefully. They talk about humanoid version 0.5 first. Think of this as the short game, the focus for roughly 2025 through 2028.
Version 0.5. Okay,
Yeah.
what does that look like? Not the walking, talking kind yet.
No, not typically. These often use wheels for mobility leveraging existing, cheaper technology. And instead of complex hands, they might have simpler single or dual arm grippers, maybe suction devices, easier to build, cheaper to deploy.
Ah, so like the training wheels version.
Huh.
Lower cost, lower risk.
That's a great way to put it. They're designed for relatively simple tasks in very structured environments. Think specific zones in factories or warehouses where things are predictable.
So using existing tech where possible.
Right. Relying on established ecosystems makes them more affordable to produce initially. And this is the version expected to drive that first little bump in market share we talked about from 0.2% up towards maybe 0.8% by 2026 or so.
Okay, so they're kind of like industrial robots dressed up in a vaguely humanoid form, designed to learn AI tasks, but without the whole balancing on two legs problem yet.
That captures it really well. They bridge the gap. And then you get to what the source calls humanoid version 1.0. That's the long game, likely seeing mass production only after 2029.
And this is the one we see in the sci-fi visions.
This is much closer. It features the human-like design, true bipedal mobility walking on two legs, and critically, those complex dual-arm dexterous hands capable of fine manipulation.
The version that could, potentially, handle complex service tasks, maybe even household chores eventually.
That's the ambition. But, and this is a big but, it requires huge breakthroughs, major advances in AI, in sensing, in battery life, in actuation, and massive cost reduction, which really only comes with economies of scale.
Which explains why it's further out, closer to 2030, before it significantly impacts market share.
Exactly. The technical hurdles and the cost hurdles are just much, much higher for version 1.0.
That timeline also makes sense when you map it to applications, right? The complexity increases over time.
Precisely. Short term, maybe the next 3-5 years, humanoids mostly stay in manufacturing. Repetitive, predictable tasks in controlled settings.
Okay.
Midterm, say 5-10 years, maybe they move into some service roles. Specific tasks, probably still in quite structured environments, limited public interaction. Think logistics, maybe some simple hospital tasks.
And then the final frontier.
Long-term, 10+ years out, is the household. That's the ultimate challenge. Highest safety requirements, dealing with complex, cluttered, non-standardized environments. Your home is way harder for a robot than a factory floor.
Yeah, finding matching socks is hard enough for humans.
Mm.
Okay, so that's the tech evolution. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the global race. Because this isn't just happening in vacuum, right? It's a geopolitical competition.
Absolutely. And here, the focus often turns to Europe's position relative to the U.S. and, of course, China.
Europe has a strong industrial base, Germany, Italy, France. But is there a risk they get left behind in this next wave?
There's definitely concern highlighted by research from places like Allianz. The core issues seem to boil down to capital and scale.
Money, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Despite Europe's deep manufacturing heritage, the U.S. currently attracts something like 7 times more venture capital investment into AI compared to Europe. 7 times.
Wow, that's a huge gap.
It is. And robotics, especially advanced robotics, needs massive, sustained capital. Think high R&D costs, specialized hardware, but also the infrastructure underneath it, like data centers. And on that front, apparently no EU city even ranks in the global top 10 data center hubs.
That funding deficit is stark, and it ties into another problem highlighted in the sources, right? Europe's productivity.
Exactly. This is quite concerning. Labor productivity in Eurozone industry grew only, wait for it, 0.8% between late 2019 and early 2024. Less than 1% growth over 4 years.
That's almost stagnant. How does that compare to the U.S.?
Over the same period, U.S. industry productivity grew 8.8%.
Okay, zero point 0.8 versus 8.8.
Yep.
That's a problem.
It is. And automation, robotics, even in less high-tech sectors, is increasingly seen as really the only viable path for Europe to kickstart some kind of productivity revival.
So if they're behind on funding and productivity is lagging, what's the proposed strategy for Europe? Do they try to go head-to-head with the U.S. and China on building the next Optimus or Atlas?
The analysis we saw suggests maybe not. It argues Europe needs a very clear, probably unified strategic roadmap. And critically, it should perhaps avoid trying to directly compete in areas where the gap might already be too wide. Think maybe autonomous vehicles or perhaps the very highest end humanoid development.
So concede those races. What should they focus on instead?
The suggestion is to target strategic sectors that are currently less robotized but are facing immediate labor shortages right now. Things like logistics, healthcare support, construction, areas where automation can solve an immediate pain point and where Europe might be able to build a strong position faster. It's sort of playing smarter defense, focusing limited resources.
That sounds pragmatic, but maybe a bit unambitious. Like conceding the cutting edge to focus on plugging immediate gaps.
It's definitely a calculated trade-off, focusing limited capital where it can have the most immediate impact and potentially secure market share in specific verticals. But even that more focused strategy faces some significant internal hurdles within Europe.
Such as, what are the roadblocks even for that approach?
Well, the first big one is the skills gap. A really high number, something like 76% of EU firms report having difficulty finding people with the necessary skills.
Skills like what?
Technicians who can install and maintain the robots, systems integrators who can program them and get them working within existing factory or warehouse setups. The practical skills needed to actually deploy and use the technology effectively. Upskilling the workforce is crucial.
Right. Just having the robot isn't enough if no one knows how to make it work. What's the other hurdle?
The other one often cited is regulatory friction. The EU AI Act, which kicked in August 2024, is known for being quite comprehensive, quite stringent.
Which is good for safety and ethics, presumably.
Absolutely, that's the intention. But the concern is that when you combine it with existing regulations, like the machinery regulation, the cumulative effect, the regulatory burden, might risk slowing down innovation. It could potentially deter investment, especially for smaller, more agile European companies, the SMEs, trying to compete on a global stage.
So finding that balance between robust regulation and fostering rapid innovation is tricky.
Extremely tricky. It's a tightrope walk.
Okay, so summing up the competitive landscape. Europe has the history, the talent base, but it seems like it needs a massive injection of coordinated capital, a clearer strategic focus, and maybe more agile regulations if it wants to avoid its robotics future being largely developed elsewhere.
That captures the situation very well, I think. The continent has the potential, but faces real structural challenges in converting that potential into market leadership in this next phase of automation.
So wrapping things up, we've seen the industrial base is strong and growing, providing the funds. And then we have this fascinating staged rollout of humanoids, starting with simpler wheeled versions before we get to the complex bipedal ones much later.
That's the core trajectory. Moving beyond traditional robots into these two distinct humanoid phases, all underpinned by this global drive for automation, fueled by cost efficiency needs and, of course, AI breakthroughs.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on, building on that European angle we discussed. Humanoid version 1.0, the advanced bipedal robot, potentially capable of operating in complex, even household environments, is going to require incredibly robust safety standards and regulatory clarity. No question about that. But could Europe's focus on being the global leader in regulating AI and robots, exemplified by things like the AI Act, inadvertently end up stifling the very innovation and investment speed needed to actually create those robots and compete effectively with the US and China, who might be moving faster with perhaps less regulatory overhead initially?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? It's the central tension in deep tech development right now. The race for innovation versus the critical need for safety and ethical guardrails. Europe seems to be prioritizing the guardrails first. Whether that helps or hinders them in the long run, well, that remains to be seen.
A fascinating dilemma. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thank you so much for navigating us through all that market data and those projections, made it incredibly clear.
My pleasure. Always fun to talk robots.
And thank you all for listening. Join us next time for another deep dive into the sources shaping our world.